I was halfway through connecting the propane line to Mrs. Henderson's house when I heard the tow truck beeping in reverse down the street, and my stomach dropped because I knew exactly where it was headed. I sprinted around the side of the house, my work gloves still on, just in time to see my service truck being lifted onto the flatbed. The thing is, that truck is not just my livelihood. It is the only propane service vehicle within 50 miles that is certified and equipped to handle the specialized tanks at the Volunteer Fire Department station here in Ridgemont, Montana, a small town tucked against the Rocky Mountain foothills where winters hit hard and fast. "Hey, what are you doing?" I yelled, running toward the tow truck operator. He was a young guy, maybe 25, wearing a faded baseball cap and looking like he would rather be anywhere else. "Sorry, man. Got a call from the HOA. Illegal parking, commercial vehicle in a residential zone." He did not even look at me, just kept working the controls. "That is my truck. I am working right here." I pointed back at Mrs. Henderson's house. "I am literally on a service call." The driver shrugged. "Take it up with them. I just do what I am told." "Your truck is going to the impound lot on Highway 12. I felt my blood pressure rising. The HOA in Ridgemont Estates had been a thorn in my side since I moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago, but this was beyond their usual petty nonsense about lawn height and mailbox colors. "You cannot just tow a service vehicle that is actively being used for work." "Already did," he said, securing the final chain. "You can file a complaint with Ridgemont Estates HOA. Have a nice day." Mrs. Henderson came out onto her porch, wrapped in a cardigan despite the mild September afternoon. "Patrick, what is happening?" Patrick Irvine, that is me, 34 years old, owner and sole operator of Mountain Valley Propane Services. I took over the business from my uncle 3 years ago when he retired to Arizona. The work is steady, the hours are long, and until recently, I thought settling down in Ridgemont Estates was a smart move. Close to most of my clients, decent houses at reasonable prices, and a community that seemed quiet enough. I was wrong about that last part. "Mrs. Henderson, I am so sorry. The HOA just towed my truck. I need to sort this out, but I will be back to finish your installation as soon as possible." Her face wrinkled with concern. "But my stove will not work without the propane connected." "I know. I will fix this, I promise." I pulled out my phone and called my business line to check my schedule. 2 more appointments today, including a critical maintenance check at the fire station. Chief Morrison had specifically requested me to come by before 5 because they were running low and needed a refill before the weekend. The Volunteer Fire Department in Ridgemont is small but essential. We do not have a full-time fire service here. The nearest city fire department is in Boulder Creek, 40 minutes away on a good day, longer when the mountain roads ice over. I dialed the HOA office number. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Ridgemont Estates Homeowners Association, this is Deborah speaking." The voice was clipped, professional, and immediately irritating. "This is Patrick Irvine, 247 Copper Ridge Lane. Your people just towed my work truck while I was on an active service call. I need it released immediately." "One moment, please." The hold music was some generic instrumental that made me want to throw my phone. I watched the tow truck disappear around the corner, taking with it about $80,000 worth of specialized equipment, tools, and propane handling gear. "Mr. Irvine, yes, I have your file here." Deborah was back. "Your vehicle was towed for violation of Section 7.3 of the HOA Covenant, which prohibits commercial vehicles from being parked in residential driveways or streets for more than 30 minutes. I was not parked. I was working. The rules apply regardless of whether you are working or not." Commercial vehicles create visual blight and decrease property values. Visual blight. My white truck with neat blue lettering was apparently offensive to the delicate sensibilities of Ridgemont Estates. Fine. What do I need to do to get it back? You will need to pay the towing fee of $350, plus a fine of $500 to the HOA for the violation. You can pick up your vehicle from the impound lot once payment is processed. $850. Are you serious? Those are the terms outlined in the covenant you signed when you purchased your property, Mr. Irvine. Will there be anything else? Yeah, there will be a lot else. Who authorized this tow? That would be our HOA president, Mrs. Cynthia Pemberton. She personally observed your vehicle and made the call. Of course it was Cynthia. I should have known. Cynthia Pemberton, the 52-year-old self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics and moral standards. She had made it her mission to comment on everything from the color of my front door to the fact that I sometimes worked on Sundays. Classic Karen energy wrapped in expensive athleisure wear and an aggressive blonde bob haircut. I need to speak with her directly. Mrs. Pemberton is currently unavailable. You can schedule an appointment for our next board meeting on the 23rd. That is 2 weeks away. I am sorry, Mr. Irvine, but those are our available times. Now, if you would like to pay the fees, I can process that over the phone. I hung up. Not my proudest moment, but I was too angry to continue that conversation productively. I called the fire station next. Ridgemont Volunteer Fire. This is Morrison. Chief, it is Patrick. We have a problem. Chief Tom Morrison had been running the volunteer fire department for 15 years. He was a good man, a retired postal worker who took the safety of our community seriously. When I explained what happened, his response was immediate. They towed your truck, the one with all the equipment for our tanks. That is the one. Patrick, we are down to less than 20% capacity. I told you that yesterday. If we get a call and need the pumps, we are in trouble. I know, Chief. I am trying to sort this out, but the HOA wants $850 and they have my truck locked up. There was a long pause on the other end. The HOA does not understand what they just did. Let me make some calls. Meanwhile, you need to get that truck back today. I drove to the impound lot in my personal vehicle, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that had seen better days. The lot was surrounded by chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, which seemed excessive for Ridgemont, but probably made sense for a business that dealt with angry people all day. The office was a small trailer with peeling paint. Inside, a heavy-set man with a thick beard sat behind a desk covered in paperwork. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. "You just towed my truck. White propane service vehicle. I need it back." "Got the release and payment." "No, I have an emergency situation. That truck needs to service the fire department today." Now he looked up. "That is unfortunate, but I cannot release any vehicle without proper authorization and payment of all fees. Company policy. The fire department could have an emergency. Then they should probably have more than one service provider." He returned to his paperwork. He was not wrong, technically. The fire department should have backup options, but propane service is not like calling a plumber. The tanks at the station are commercial grade, requiring specific certifications and equipment. The nearest other certified provider is in Boulder Creek, and they are usually booked weeks in advance. I left the impound lot and drove straight to the HOA office, located in a small plaza near the entrance of Ridgemont Estates. The office was nicer than it needed to be, with polished floors and motivational posters about community and property values. Deborah sat at the front desk, a woman in her 30s with a tight bun and glasses on a chain. She looked up as I entered, and recognition flashed across her face. "Mr. Irvine, did you call ahead for an appointment?" No, I need to speak with Cynthia Pemberton right now. As I mentioned on the phone, Mrs. Pemberton is unavailable. Then I will wait. That is not. I will wait. I sat down in one of the chairs lining the wall. Deborah looked flustered but returned to typing on her computer. 20 minutes passed. I checked my phone constantly, half expecting a call from Chief Morrison about an emergency. Finally, a door at the back of the office opened, and Cynthia Pemberton emerged. She was exactly as I remembered from our previous encounters. Blonde hair cut in that speak-to-the-manager style, expensive yoga pants paired with a designer top, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. "Mr. Irvine, what a surprise," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I understand you are upset about your truck. Upset does not begin to cover it. You towed my service vehicle while I was working. You violated HOA regulations. Surely you understand that rules exist for a reason. The rule says 30 minutes. I was not parked for 30 minutes. According to my notes, your truck was on Copper Ridge Lane for 45 minutes before I called for the tow. Because I was working inside a client's house, connecting her propane line. That is what I do. That is my job." Cynthia folded her arms. "And that is precisely the issue, Mr. Irvine. You chose to operate a commercial business while living in a residential neighborhood. That was your choice, but it does not exempt you from community standards. Community standards do not override basic common sense. I need that truck to service the fire department today." "The fire department?" She raised an eyebrow. "I am sure they have other options." "They do not. I am the only certified propane service provider in the area who can handle their equipment. If there is a fire emergency and they cannot respond because their pumps are not fueled, that is on you." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. "That sounds like a fire department problem, not an HOA problem. It is everyone's problem when houses burn down. Do not be dramatic. I am sure the fire department has contingency plans. Their contingency plan is me." We were starting to attract attention. Deborah had stopped typing and was watching us with wide eyes. Cynthia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Mr. Irvine, I understand you are frustrated, but the rules are the rules. Pay the fees, retrieve your truck, and in the future, park it elsewhere when making service calls. Perhaps in a commercial zone or at a storage facility. The nearest storage facility is 15 miles away. That is insane. Those are your options. Now I have other matters to attend to." She turned to walk back to her office. "This is not over," I called after her. She paused at the door and looked back. "Actually, it is. Good day, Mr. Irvine." I left the HOA office feeling like I had been punched in the gut. The situation was absurd, but Cynthia had all the power here. The HOA covenant was legally binding. I had signed it without reading all the fine print, assuming it was the standard stuff about keeping lawns mowed and not painting your house purple. My phone rang. It was Chief Morrison. "Patrick, I talked to the mayor. He is trying to reach someone at the HOA, but in the meantime, we need a solution. Can you get the truck? Not without paying $850, which I do not have in my pocket right now." Business had been good, but most of my cash was tied up in inventory and equipment payments. "I cannot help with that. Department budget is stretched as it is." "I know, Chief. Let me figure something out." I called my bank and arranged a transfer to get cash, then drove to an ATM. The whole process took another hour. By the time I returned to the impound lot with a stack of bills, it was past 3 in the afternoon. The bearded man counted the money slowly, twice, before handing me a release form. "Sign here, here, and here." I scrawled my signature and grabbed the keys to my truck. "Have a nice day," he said without emotion. The truck started fine, all the equipment still intact. I drove straight to the fire station, a modest building on the edge of town with 2 bays and living quarters for the volunteers when they pulled overnight duty. Chief Morrison met me outside, relief evident on his face. "Thank God, we are really cutting it close." "Sorry, Chief. This whole thing was insane." I heard. The mayor talked to Cynthia Pemberton. She was not budging. I began setting up the equipment to refill the station's propane tanks. The process would take about 2 hours, requiring careful monitoring and specific safety protocols. These tanks powered the fire pumps, critical equipment that allowed the department to fight fires in areas without hydrants, which was most of Ridgemont. As I worked, other volunteers arrived for the evening shift. They had all heard about the situation. "That HOA lady is crazy," said Jake Winters, a volunteer firefighter who worked construction during the day. "She tried to fine my buddy for having his boat parked in his driveway for 2 days. She fined the Johnsons because their Christmas lights were still up in January," added Sarah Chen, another volunteer who worked as a nurse. "Said it violated the aesthetic standards." The stories kept coming. Apparently, Cynthia had made enemies throughout Ridgemont Estates. But no one had figured out how to stop her. The HOA board was stacked with her friends, and she ran meetings like a dictator. "Has anyone tried to vote her out?" I asked. Jake laughed. "You would need to attend the annual meeting and get enough homeowners to care. Most people just pay the fines and move on. It is easier than fighting." "Well, she just cost me a day of work and $850. I am not moving on." Chief Morrison pulled me aside when the tanks were nearly full. "Patrick, I appreciate what you do for us, but I am worried about what happens next time. The HOA seems determined to make your life difficult." "What are you suggesting?" "Maybe we need to find a backup provider, someone from Boulder Creek who can commit to emergency service. That is going to cost you more, and they are not going to prioritize a small volunteer department." "I know, but we cannot risk being caught without fuel because of HOA politics." He was right, and that made me angrier. This was not just about me anymore. Cynthia's petty enforcement of rules was creating a genuine safety issue for the entire community. I finished the job around 6, packed up my equipment, and drove home. My house on Copper Ridge Lane looked the same as always, a modest 2-story with blue siding and a small front yard. I had bought it thinking I was joining a real community. Instead, I had moved into a neighborhood run by someone who cared more about appearances than people. That evening, I sat down with the HOA covenant document, all 47 pages of it. The commercial vehicle restriction was clear, but there were exceptions for temporary service work that allowed up to 2 hours of parking. The problem was proving I had not exceeded that time limit. Cynthia claimed 45 minutes, but I knew I had been at Mrs. Henderson's house for barely 30 minutes before the tow truck arrived. There was also a clause about the HOA board's authority to impose fines and enforce violations, but it required photographic evidence and notification to the homeowner before action was taken. I had received no notification, no warning, just a tow truck. I started documenting everything. Photos of my truck with time stamps, my service log showing when I arrived at Mrs. Henderson's house, and a written statement of the day's events. If Cynthia wanted a fight, I would give her one. The next morning, I returned to Mrs. Henderson's house to finish her installation. Before I started, I took photos of my truck parked on the street, noted the time, and set a timer on my phone. Mrs. Henderson answered the door with a smile. "Oh, Patrick, I am so glad you are back. I had to eat sandwiches for dinner last night." "Sorry about that, Mrs. Henderson. Let me get you fixed up." The installation took 40 minutes. I was back in my truck, engine running before the timer hit the 1-hour mark. No tow truck appeared, which was something. Over the next week, I continued my regular service calls, hyper-aware of parking times and locations. I also started talking to other homeowners in Ridgemont estates, asking about their experiences with the HOA. The stories were worse than I expected. The Martins had been fined $500 because their teenage son's car was parked on the street overnight, violating a rule they did not know existed. The Kowalskis were threatened with a lien on their property because they planted roses that were not on the HOA-approved list of acceptable flowers. The Davises were in a year-long battle over the color of their shutters, which Cynthia claimed were too blue. Everyone had a story, but no one had organized to do anything about it. Fear of escalating fines and legal action kept people in line. I attended the next HOA board meeting on September 23rd. The meeting was held in the community center, a large room with folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where Cynthia and 4 other board members sat like judges. About 20 homeowners were in attendance, most looking bored or resigned. I took a seat in the back and waited. The meeting covered the usual topics: landscaping maintenance, pool rules for next summer, and a proposal to increase HOA dues by 15%. When they opened the floor for homeowner concerns, I raised my hand. Cynthia's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Yes, Mr. Irvine," I stood up. "I would like to address the incident on September 15th when my service truck was towed without warning while I was on an active work call. That matter has been resolved. You retrieved your vehicle and paid the appropriate fees. Actually, it has not been resolved. According to Section 7.3 of the Covenant, homeowners are entitled to written notification before any enforcement action is taken. I received no notification." Cynthia glanced at the other board members. "Notification is for ongoing violations. Your truck was an immediate visual blight, requiring immediate action. The Covenant makes no distinction for immediate versus ongoing violations. It requires notification in all cases. Are you a lawyer, Mr. Irvine?" "No, but I can read. And I read the Covenant very carefully after you cost me $850 and nearly created a safety emergency for our fire department." Murmurs rippled through the room. Other homeowners were starting to pay attention. "The fire department situation was regrettable, but it does not excuse your violation of community rules," Cynthia said, her voice tightening. "What is regrettable is that you prioritize the aesthetics of a parked truck over public safety. If there had been a fire that day and the department could not respond because I could not refuel their tanks, how would you have explained that? That is a hypothetical and not relevant to this meeting." "It is absolutely relevant. The HOA has a responsibility to the broader community, not just property values." Another board member, a man in his 60s named George, spoke up. "Mrs. Pemberton, maybe we should review the notification policy." "If we did not follow proper procedure, we followed procedure perfectly," Cynthia interrupted. "Mr. Irvine is attempting to distract from his own violation with dramatic scenarios about fire emergencies." "It is not dramatic when I am the only person who can service their equipment," I shot back. The meeting devolved into a debate. Some homeowners sided with me. Others defended the HOA's right to enforce rules. In the end, Cynthia gavelled the meeting to a close without any resolution, saying the board would take the matter under advisement. I left frustrated but not defeated. At least the issue was now on record, witnessed by other homeowners. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was a formal notice of violation for disrupting a board meeting and displaying aggressive behavior. The fine was $250. They were retaliating, and they were not even trying to hide it. I contacted a lawyer in Boulder Creek named Martin Hayes. His office was above a coffee shop, and his rates were reasonable. I explained the situation, showed him the covenant, and outlined Cynthia's pattern of behavior. Martin listened carefully, taking notes. You have a decent case for improper notification on the initial towing. The retaliation fine is shakier, but it fits a pattern of harassment. The question is, do you want to sue the HOA? Can I win? Maybe. But litigation is expensive and slow. Even if you win, you are still living in a neighborhood run by someone who hates you. Have you considered selling and moving? I should not have to move because someone on a power trip is abusing HOA rules. You are right, you should not. But practically speaking, fighting an HOA is like fighting City Hall. They have more resources and more patience than you do. I thought about it. Martin was not wrong, but the principle of the thing ate at me. Cynthia was a bully, and bullies do not stop until someone stands up to them. What if other homeowners joined in, a class action or something? That would strengthen your position significantly. Do you think you can organize that? I can try. Over the next 3 weeks, I went door to door in Ridgemont Estates, talking to neighbors, collecting stories, and gauging interest in collective action against the HOA board. The response was mixed. Some people were eager to help, others were afraid of making things worse. But slowly, a group formed. We called ourselves the Ridgemont Homeowners Coalition. 23 families committed to challenging the HOA's leadership at the next annual meeting in January. Cynthia, of course, heard about it. The fines and violation notices increased. My truck was ticketed twice more, even though I had been scrupulous about parking times. Other coalition members reported similar harassment. Then something happened that changed everything. On October 12th, a fire broke out at the old Miller farm on the outskirts of Ridgemont. The property had been abandoned for years, but it was close enough to other homes that the fire department responded immediately. Chief Morrison later told me what happened. The trucks arrived on scene, but when they attempted to engage the pumps, the propane system failed. The tanks I had refilled weeks earlier were still full, but someone had tampered with the valve system, causing a pressure failure. The fire spread to an adjacent barn before Boulder Creek's fire department arrived with backup equipment. No one was hurt, but the property damage was extensive. The investigation revealed that the valve system had been deliberately loosened, likely by someone without technical knowledge who did not realize the danger they were creating. Chief Morrison was furious. Someone tried to sabotage us. This was not an accident. The fire marshal got involved, and the investigation expanded. They interviewed all volunteers, checked the station's security footage, and examined the equipment. Meanwhile, I started looking at my own truck more carefully. After the towing incident, I had installed a small dashcam that recorded whenever the vehicle was parked. I went through the footage from the past month. On October 10th, 2 days before the fire, the camera caught something interesting. At 2:17 a.m., a figure approached my truck where it was parked in my driveway. The person tried the door handles, checked the fuel tank area, and then left quickly when a neighbor's dog started barking. The footage was grainy, but the person was clearly a woman, medium height, blonde hair. I sent the footage to Chief Morrison and the fire marshal. They enhanced the image and confirmed what I suspected. Cynthia Pemberton had been snooping around my truck in the middle of the night. The fire marshal brought her in for questioning. I was not present for that interview, but Chief Morrison told me that Cynthia initially denied everything. When confronted with the video footage, she changed her story, claiming she was just concerned about the truck being a fire hazard in a residential area and wanted to inspect it. That explanation fell apart when they matched her timeline to the station's sabotage. She had been seen near the fire station late at night on October 9th by a volunteer who was leaving after a training session. At the time, it seemed like nothing. In hindsight, it was damning. The fire marshal consulted with the county prosecutor. Tampering with fire safety equipment was a serious crime, especially when it resulted in property damage and endangered lives. On October 20th, Cynthia Pemberton was arrested and charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and tampering with public safety equipment. The bail was set at $50,000. The news hit Ridgemont like a bomb. People could not believe that the HOA president, the woman who lectured everyone about community standards, had sabotaged the fire department out of spite. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Cynthia from her position. George, the older board member who had questioned her at the meeting, was appointed interim president. At his request, I attended a meeting with the new board. The tone was completely different. "Mr. Irvine, we owe you an apology," George began. What Cynthia did was unconscionable, and the board should have reined her in long before it reached this point. "It was not just about me," I said. "She targeted a lot of people. We know. We are going to review every fine and violation notice issued in the past year. If we find evidence of improper procedure or retaliation, we will rescind the fines and issue refunds." "What about the commercial vehicle rule?" George sighed. "That rule was always meant for people running auto shops or storage businesses out of their homes, not service providers like you. We are going to amend the covenant to clarify that service vehicles are allowed during active work periods, with reasonable time limits." It was more than I had expected. The new board also agreed to drop the fine for disrupting the meeting and refunded my $850 from the towing incident. The Ridgemont Homeowners Coalition disbanded, satisfied that the immediate threat was gone. Some members remained skeptical of the HOA, and I could not blame them. But George and the new board seemed genuinely interested in making things right. Cynthia's legal troubles were just beginning. The county prosecutor took the case seriously, treating it as a public safety issue rather than a petty dispute. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had not intended to cause a fire or hurt anyone, that she was merely trying to inspect equipment out of concern. The prosecutor countered that intent does not matter when you tamper with fire safety systems. The damage to the Miller property was real, and the potential for loss of life was significant. The trial was held in Boulder Creek in early December. I testified about the towing incident, the harassment, and the dashcam footage. Chief Morrison testified about the station sabotage and the fire response failure. Other homeowners testified about Cynthia's pattern of vindictive behavior. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Cynthia was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, with the possibility of parole after 9 months, plus restitution to the Millers for their property damage, and a fine of $10,000. Her lawyer filed an appeal, but most people in Ridgemont felt justice had been served. The fire department upgraded their security and installed tamper-proof locks on the propane system. Chief Morrison also contracted with a provider in Boulder Creek as a backup, just in case, though I remained their primary service provider. Life in Ridgemont Estates slowly returned to normal. The HOA, under George's leadership, focused on actual community issues like road maintenance and snow removal rather than micromanaging homeowners' lives. People started attending meetings again, not out of fear, but because they felt their voices mattered. I finished out the year with steady work, and the incident even brought me more business. People in the area had heard about what happened and respected that I had stood up to the HOA. Turns out, principles are good for business. On a cold Saturday in January, I was driving through Ridgemont when I passed the fire station. Chief Morrison was outside, working on one of the trucks. I pulled over. "Chief, how are things?" "Good, Patrick. Real good. We just got approved for a grant to upgrade some equipment. Should make our jobs easier." "That is great news." "Yeah, hey, I never really thanked you properly for what you did. Standing up to Cynthia, that took guts." "I did not have much choice. She forced my hand." "Maybe, but a lot of people would have just paid the fines and stayed quiet." "You made sure she could not hurt anyone else." We talked for a few more minutes, then I headed home. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ridgemont was beautiful, especially in winter when snow covered everything and the air was crisp and clean. I pulled into my driveway on Copper Ridge Lane, parking my service truck without worry. The new HOA rules were clear, reasonable, and actually made sense. George had even apologized personally for the old board's behavior and invited me to join a committee on updating the covenant. I declined. I had no interest in HOA politics, but I appreciated the gesture. Inside my house, I made dinner and watched the news. There was a segment about Cynthia's appeal being denied. She would serve her full sentence. The reporter interviewed some Ridgemont residents who expressed relief and a hope that the community could move forward. I felt the same way. The whole ordeal had been exhausting, stressful, and expensive. But it also taught me something important. Standing up to bullies is hard but necessary. If I had just paid the fine and moved on, Cynthia would have kept abusing her power, and eventually, someone could have gotten seriously hurt. The fire at the Miller farm was a wake-up call. It showed that HOA tyranny was not just annoying, it was dangerous. When people prioritize appearances over substance, when they care more about control than community, things go wrong. Over the following months, the story spread beyond Ridgemont. Local news picked it up, then regional outlets. I gave a few interviews, always emphasizing the same point. HOAs can do good work, but they need accountability. Boards need oversight, and homeowners need to stay engaged. Some people reached out from other neighborhoods, asking for advice on dealing with their own problematic HOAs. I was not an expert, but I shared what I learned. Document everything, organize with neighbors, and do not be afraid to get legal help when necessary. By spring, Ridgemont Estates felt like a different place. The new HOA board focused on actual improvements like fixing the community center's roof and organizing neighborhood events. People were friendlier, more willing to help each other out. I even started dating someone, a woman named Nancy Foster who worked as a teacher in Boulder Creek. We met at a community barbecue that the HOA organized, and she laughed when I told her my story about the propane truck. "You are the guy who got the HOA president arrested. That is amazing." I do not know about amazing. It was mostly just frustrating. Still, not many people would have fought back. Nancy was smart, funny, and did not care that I drove a propane truck for a living. We started spending more time together, and by summer, things were getting serious. Life was good. The business was thriving, the community was healthy, and I had found someone who made me happy. The whole situation with Cynthia felt like a bad dream, something that happened to someone else. Then, in August, almost a year after the initial towing incident, I got a call from Chief Morrison. "Patrick, we have a situation. Cynthia is being released early. Parole board approved it." "How early?" "She gets out next week. Served 9 months. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Is that going to be a problem? I do not know. Just thought you should know. Keep your eyes open. I thanked him and hung up. Nancy noticed my expression. What is wrong? Cynthia Pemberton is getting out of jail. The HOA lady. Can she come back to Ridgemont? There is no law against it, but she does not live here anymore. The HOA foreclosed on her house for unpaid dues and fines. Good riddance then. I hoped Nancy was right, but I could not shake the feeling that this was not over. Cynthia was released on August 15th. I knew because I checked the county records online. Her parole conditions included community service, restitution payments, and a prohibition on holding any HOA board positions for 5 years. 2 weeks went by without incident. I started to relax, thinking maybe she had moved away and was rebuilding her life somewhere else. Then I got a call from Mrs. Henderson, my client whose propane installation had been interrupted by the towing. Patrick, someone left a note on my door. It is very strange. What does it say? It says, be careful who you do business with. Some people cause more trouble than they are worth. It is not signed. I felt anger rising. Mrs. Henderson, do you still have the note? Yes, it is right here. Can you take a picture and text it to me? She did. The note was printed on plain paper, generic and untraceable, but the message was clear. Cynthia was trying to intimidate my clients. Over the next few days, 3 more clients reported similar notes. I contacted Chief Morrison and the police. They talked to Cynthia, but she denied everything. Without proof, there was nothing they could do. I decided to be proactive. I sent a message to all my clients, explaining the situation and assuring them that the notes were from someone with a grudge, not a legitimate concern. Most people were understanding. A few were nervous, but no one canceled their service. Then the online reviews started. Someone created fake accounts and left 1-star reviews for Mountain Valley propane services on every platform: Google, Yelp, Facebook. The reviews claimed I was unreliable, overpriced, and rude. I reported them as fake, but the platforms were slow to respond. The damage was done. My online reputation took a hit, and new customer inquiries dropped. Nancy suggested I hire a reputation management service. They can help bury the fake reviews and promote real testimonials. That costs money. So does losing business. She was right. I hired a firm in Boulder Creek that specialized in online reputation repair. They worked fast, getting the fake reviews removed and encouraging satisfied clients to leave positive feedback. Meanwhile, I documented every incident: the notes, the reviews, the timing. I built a file showing a clear pattern of harassment coinciding with Cynthia's release from jail. When I had enough evidence, I contacted her parole officer, a woman named Linda Reyes. I explained the situation and provided the documentation. Linda was sympathetic. I will talk to her. If she is violating parole conditions by harassing you, that is serious. A week later, Linda called me back. I met with Cynthia. She admitted to the notes but claimed she was just warning people, not threatening anyone. She denied the fake reviews. Can you prove she did them? Not yet. But I am watching her closely. If she steps out of line again, I will recommend revocation of parole. That seemed to do the trick. The harassment stopped. No more notes, no more fake reviews. My business recovered and life went back to normal. In October, a year after Cynthia's arrest, the Ridgemont Homeowners Coalition held a reunion barbecue. It was George's idea, a way to celebrate how far the community had come. About 50 people showed up, families with kids, older couples and singles like me. Nancy came with me, and we spent the afternoon eating burgers and playing cornhole. George gave a short speech, thanking everyone for their patience during the transition and highlighting the improvements made over the past year. He also acknowledged the role I played in exposing Cynthia's abuse of power. Patrick could have just paid the fines and moved on. Instead, he stood up for what was right, and we are all better off because of it. People clapped, and I felt embarrassed but also proud. It had been a difficult year, but worth it. Later that evening, as Nancy and I walked home, she squeezed my hand. "You did a good thing, you know. I just did what needed to be done. That is what makes it good." We reached my house, and I looked around the neighborhood. The streets were clean, the houses well-maintained, and the people friendly. Ridgemont Estates was finally living up to its potential, a real community rather than a dictatorship. Inside, I checked my phone and saw a message from Chief Morrison. "Tanks refilled, equipment checked. Thanks as always, Patrick. Sleep well knowing we are ready for anything." I smiled. That was the whole point, really. Keeping people safe, doing good work, and standing up when it mattered. The next morning, I woke up early and got ready for another day of service calls. My truck started smoothly, the equipment was in perfect order, and the weather was clear. As I drove out of Ridgemont Estates, I passed the HOA office. George was outside, planting flowers in the beds near the entrance. He waved and I waved back. Life was not perfect, but it was good. And sometimes, that is all you can ask for.